Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. My name is Gabrielle Turner. I am 32 years old, and I am a forensic accountant. I make a living finding what does not belong where it sits. My work is slow and methodical, a constant search for the transaction that should not be there, the number that does not align with the story it is supposed to tell. I have always trusted that if you follow the trail closely enough, the truth reveals itself. And yet, 3 nights into my husband's hospitalization, I was the one completely blind. Jared Turner lay in the hospital bed beside me, both legs wrapped in thick white casts suspended by ropes and metal pulleys. The room on the 8th floor of a Chicago medical center smelled of antiseptic and old linen. The fluorescent lights hummed softly above us. Outside the window, the city was reduced to distant shapes and blinking red lights. It was close to 3 o'clock in the morning, the hour when hospitals feel less like places of healing and more like quiet holding rooms for fear. I had not slept properly in days. I sat curled in a folding chair, my neck stiff, my lower back throbbing, afraid even the smallest movement would wake him and trigger another wave of pain. Jared moaned softly in his sleep, sweat dotting his forehead, his breathing shallow and uneven. To anyone watching, he looked fragile, broken, dependent. I leaned forward and adjusted the blanket around his chest, whispering his name under my breath, reminding myself that this was marriage, that when one person fell, the other carried the weight. That was when the door opened. The head nurse, Patrice Miller, pushed her cart inside. She moved with a practiced calm, the kind of woman who had seen too many emergencies to be careless or dramatic. The machines by Jared's bed cast a soft glow over her face as she checked the intravenous line and glanced at the monitors. She barely spoke, only murmuring a quiet greeting. Then she turned to me and asked in a low, steady voice if I could step out to the nurse's station and ask Joy to bring in a new set of supplies. As I passed her in the narrow space between the bed and the cart, something cold and small pressed into my palm. I froze for half a second, my fingers closing around it automatically. Patrice did not look at me. She simply raised one finger to her lips, a clear warning to stay silent. Her eyes met mine for a brief moment, calm but intent, before she turned back to Jared as if nothing had happened. My heart began to pound so loudly I could feel it in my throat. I walked into the hallway, the door closing behind me with a soft click that sounded much louder than it should have. The corridor was dim, lit by a row of small recessed lights. A janitor pushed a mop bucket past me, not bothering to look up. Somewhere down the hall, a machine beeped steadily. Under the faint light near the supply room, I opened my hand and saw a small folded piece of paper. My fingers trembled as I unfolded it. It was a single sentence written fast and uneven, the letters slanting slightly, as if the writer had been rushed or nervous. Check last night's security camera. He is not asleep. For a second, my mind refused to process the words. The sentence sat on the page like an error in a ledger, something that did not belong yet could not be dismissed. In that moment, everything I thought I knew about my life shifted in a way I could not yet name. Before that night in the hospital, I believed my life was built on solid ground. I was disciplined, careful, and predictable in what I considered the best way. As a forensic accountant, I spent my days untangling financial lies for corporations and courts in downtown Chicago. I trusted facts. I trusted patterns. I trusted that if you paid attention, you could see trouble coming long before it arrived. And at home, I believed I trusted my marriage. Jared and I had been together for 8 years. He was charming in a quiet way, the kind of man who knew how to speak gently and appear dependable without trying too hard. He worked in construction management, always talking about long hours, unpredictable projects, and unstable contracts. I handled our finances, supervised our accounts, organized our bills. He handled everything else. That balance had always felt safe, like an agreed arrangement each of us understood. Then came the accident. One phone call shattered the structure of our routine in a single evening. I was at my office finishing a report when my cell phone vibrated, an unknown number flashing on the screen. When I answered, a stranger's voice told me Jared had crashed his car on the expressway. They said he was lucky to be alive. The doctor later explained his legs were badly injured and spoke quietly about the word wheelchair, letting it hang in the air like a threat no one wanted to say out loud. From that moment on, I stopped being Gabrielle the professional and became Gabrielle the wife. I took time off work without hesitation. I slept in a chair beside his bed. I measured my days by medication schedules, physical therapy updates, and visiting hours. I told myself that love was proven in endurance, that showing up over and over again meant more than any promise spoken on a wedding day. Exhaustion became normal, but I embraced it as proof that I was doing what a partner was supposed to do. During those first days, someone else stepped more firmly into our lives. Alana Green, Jared's younger cousin, had recently moved to Chicago from another city and was still finding her footing. She was bright, talkative, quick to smile, and always ready to help. She ran errands, brought food in carefully labeled containers, and handled paperwork when my mind felt too foggy to understand one more form. When I was too tired to think, she quietly filled the gaps without complaint. I remember thinking how fortunate we were to have her. I thanked her so often she eventually laughed and told me she would start charging me for compliments. She called Jared Big Cousin and squeezed his hand, promising him she would keep the family updated. She offered to sit with him so I could shower or take a short walk outside. I trusted her completely, partly because she seemed so genuine, and partly because I wanted to believe that family stepping in during a crisis was a blessing, not a complication. Looking back now, that trust feels almost embarrassing. At the time, however, I saw nothing wrong. I saw a family pulling together around one of its own. I saw myself doing what a good wife was supposed to do. I saw a young cousin trying to be helpful. I had no idea that while I was sacrificing sleep, work, and my own sanity, something else was quietly forming right beside me. I was standing in the middle of it, surrounded by it, and somehow, I did not see it. After the third night in the hospital, exhaustion started to blur my thoughts in a way I could no longer ignore. I told myself that was the reason my mind felt unsettled, that my nerves were overextended. But beneath the fatigue, something quieter was bothering me. Jared complained of pain constantly, but his complaints had patterns. When I was near the bed, he groaned and clenched his jaw. If a nurse entered, his moans softened. When Alana was in the room, his breathing became shallow and dramatic, his eyes squeezing shut at the slightest movement. Yet during the rare moments when I stepped away to make a call, grab coffee from the vending machine, or splash cold water on my face in the restroom, the room seemed strangely calm when I returned. The monitors were steady. The nurses appeared relaxed. Occasionally, I thought I saw a trace of something like impatience vanish from his expression the moment he realized I was back. I noticed, and then I told myself not to be uncharitable, not to read too much into fleeting impressions. Whenever I tried to check his legs or adjust the edges of the casts, Jared stopped me. His hand would close around my wrist, his grip surprisingly firm for someone supposedly exhausted, and he would say it was too disturbing to look at. He did not want me to see him like that. He would say he wanted me to remember him standing, not broken. I accepted his words without argument, telling myself it was about dignity, that some people needed to guard their pride even when they were hurt. His phone changed too. Before the accident, Jared never locked it. It was always lying around on the kitchen counter, on the coffee table, on his nightstand. Now it stayed hidden under his pillow or pressed against his thigh, always face down. If a message arrived, he silenced it instantly, hand shooting to the device with a speed that did not match his claimed weakness. When I asked if it was work, he gave a strained laugh and said he was embarrassed by how useless he had become. Alana noticed everything, or at least she acted as if she did. She would give me sympathetic looks when I rubbed my eyes. She reminded me to rest, insisted I go outside for fresh air, told me I was doing more than enough. Sometimes I caught them exchanging glances, brief and unreadable, but I dismissed it each time. When you care about someone, you work very hard not to see what hurts. You excuse what could be explained. You smooth over edges that might cut you if you looked at them directly. Patrice's note replayed in my mind over and over. He is not asleep. I tried to push it away, folding the paper and tucking it deep into my pocket as if hiding it physically would quiet the doubt it had stirred. I told myself nurses were tired. I told myself hospitals bred rumors. I told myself my fear was creating patterns where none existed, like seeing a familiar shape in random static. But the problem with patterns is simple. Once you see the first one clearly, you cannot unsee the rest. Somewhere between the beeping machines and the quiet breathing of the man I thought I knew, doubt finally took root. It did not arrive like a shout. It arrived like a whisper that refused to leave. I did not confront Jared. I did not ask questions. I did not cry or shake him awake demanding to know the truth. Instead, I did what I had been trained to do my entire adult life. I looked for evidence. The next morning, after making sure Alana was in the room and Jared was settled with his medications and breakfast, I told them I needed to stop by the office to handle some time-sensitive documents. Jared gave me a weary smile and squeezed my hand, telling me he hated that I had to juggle everything. Alana told me to take my time and promised she would stay with him. I nodded, picked up my bag, and walked out of the room. I passed the elevators and kept walking, taking the stairs down to the parking garage instead. Each step echoed more loudly than it should have. The concrete smelled faintly of oil and damp air. When I reached my car, I climbed inside, shut the door, and locked it. Only then did I allow myself to exhale fully, my breath fogging the windshield in a slow, uneven cloud. My hands were still steady, but my chest felt tight. I called an old friend from college, someone I trusted with more than casual stories. His name was Reggie Myers, and he worked in cybersecurity for a firm that occasionally collaborated with legal teams. We had shared group projects and long nights in the library years ago. More recently, I had brought him in on confidential investigations when a company needed quiet, discreet access to digital information. When he answered, his voice was groggy. "Gabrielle," he said, "it is barely morning. Are you all right?" "I need a favor," I said. I explained the hospital, the accident, the note from Patrice, the way Jared's behavior felt staged at odd moments. I heard Reggie fall silent on the other end of the line, the quiet stretching until it felt heavy. "This is serious," he finally said. "Hospital security footage is not easy to access quietly." "I know," I answered. "I also know you can do it." He let out a slow breath. "Some things, once you see them, you cannot unsee," Reggie warned. "Are you prepared for that?" I stared at the gray concrete wall of the garage, at the faint streaks left by years of runoff. "I am tired of feeling like I am losing my mind," I said. "I would rather know than keep guessing." "Give me a couple of hours," he replied. "I will send you a secure link. Do not open it where anyone can see your screen." "I understand," I said. My voice sounded calm, almost detached. After we hung up, I sat in the silence of the car and folded my hands in my lap, feeling each minute stretch and bend. Less than 2 hours later, my phone vibrated. A message from Reggie appeared with a secure link and a short note. "This is everything from last night in that room. Be certain before you press play." I swallowed hard, opened my laptop, connected my phone's hotspot, and clicked the link. I plugged in my headphones and stared at the screen, surprised by how steady my hands remained. The footage was black and white, taken from the ceiling of the hospital room, the angle capturing the bed, the doorway, and the small visitor's chair. I watched myself on the screen, small and tired, adjusting the blanket around Jared before leaving the room. My shoulders were slumped. My steps looked slow. The door closed behind me. The room went still. For a brief moment, I hoped Patrice was wrong, that this would show nothing but a man in pain trying to sleep. Then Jared's eyes opened. Not slowly, not groggy, not the sluggish flutter of someone half-conscious. They snapped open, alert and sharp. He lifted his head, scanned the room, and pushed himself up on his elbows with ease. The movement was smooth and controlled. My breath caught in my throat as I watched him swing his casted legs slightly, rotate them as if testing the range of motion, then reach under his pillow for his phone. There was no hesitation, no grimace, no tremor of pain running through his face. A few minutes later, the door opened again. Alana walked in carrying a large bag. She smiled widely as she closed the door behind her. "Is she gone?" Alana asked, her voice clear in the recording. "Yeah," Jared said. "She will be gone for a while. She thinks she needs to sign something at work." Alana set the bag on the table and laughed. "You are terrible," she said. "But I have to admit, you commit to the role." I could hardly keep a straight face with all that moaning last night. "Do not start," Jared replied, grinning. "My throat actually hurt from all of that, and that nurse keeps watching me like she knows something." They unpacked containers of real food, not the bland hospital meals he had been complaining about. Fried chicken, macaroni and cheese, cornbread, greens, and a six-pack of beer glinting faintly in the camera's gray light. Jared ate with an appetite I had not seen in days. He drank, laughed, gestured with his hands as he talked. He joked about being tired of soup and pretending to be weak. Alana sat close to him on the side of the bed, touching his leg through the cast. "You need to remember to limp with your upper body too," she said. "When you reach for something, wince a little." I know," Jared answered, rolling his eyes. "I have it under control." Gabrielle has always been easy to convince. All I have to do is look ashamed and talk about not wanting to be a burden. I pressed my lips together, the taste of metal rising in my mouth. The footage continued. Then came the part that turned my blood cold. They began talking about the house, the brownstone my parents left me on the south side, the one in my name alone. Jared said once it was sold, his debts would be gone. Gambling debts. Loans from dangerous people he had not told me about. She will sell it, Jared said calmly in the video. She always sacrifices herself first. That is who she is. Once the money is secure and everything is paid off, I will file for divorce. I will give her some story about needing space, about not wanting to drag her down. Alana laughed quietly. You are unbelievable, she said. You are really going to walk away after she signs? That was always the plan, he replied. She is good with numbers, but she is terrible at people. When the video ended, I removed my headphones and sat in silence. The air in the car felt thin, too light to hold me. I did not scream. I did not collapse. I did not pound on the steering wheel or curse his name. I simply understood, with a clarity that felt almost clinical, that the man in that hospital bed was not injured in the way he claimed. He was performing, and I was the audience he believed would never walk away. I had always imagined that discovering betrayal would feel loud, like glass shattering or a door slamming. I imagined myself shaking, my voice rising, my hands unsteady. Instead, sitting alone in that parked car, what I felt was something far quieter and far worse. Humiliation. Not just because Jared had lied. Not even because of Alana. It was because I had been reduced to a role in their story, the predictable wife, the reliable sacrifice, the woman who would always choose endurance over suspicion. I replayed the footage in my mind, Jared laughing, Alana reminding him to act weaker, the casual way they spoke about my house, my parents' home, as if it were already gone. They did not fear me. They did not respect me. They assumed I would bend, because I always had. That realization burned more than any insult ever could. Slowly, something inside me shifted. The part of me that softened situations, that searched for explanations and excuses, went very still. In its place stood the woman who reviewed financial disasters for a living and did not blink when she uncovered fraud. I wiped my face, not because I was crying, but because I was done being the person they expected. I deleted nothing. I saved everything. I backed up the footage, stored copies in multiple secure locations, and sent one to Reggie with a brief thank you. I changed my passwords. I secured my documents. I contacted my parents' old attorney and quietly removed Jared's access to anything related to the house. I moved carefully, like someone walking through a dark room full of broken glass. Every step was deliberate. Every decision was recorded. From that moment on, I stopped reacting as a wife and started thinking like an investigator. If they believed I was easy to manipulate, I would let them keep believing it. If they needed me compliant, I would appear calm, agreeable, slow to decide. The truth was simple. They thought they were running a con on a woman who loved too much to question them. They had no idea that the woman they were lying to made a living exposing people exactly like them. The hardest part was going back into that hospital room and pretending nothing had changed. When I returned, I walked in with the same tired expression, the same careful movements. Jared looked up, eyebrows drawn together in concern. "You were gone longer than I expected," he said. "Is everything all right at work?" "They needed signatures on more paperwork than I thought," I answered. "It took time, but it is handled." I adjusted his pillow, smoothed the blanket at the foot of his bed, and asked how he was feeling. He launched into a familiar pattern of complaints. The pain in his legs, the stiffness in his back, the way the staff did not move quickly enough. I listened without interrupting, nodding at the right moments. When Alana looked at me with concern and told me I should take better care of myself, I thanked her with what I hoped looked like genuine gratitude. Jared noticed the shift almost immediately. When a person believes they are losing control, they tighten their grip. When they believe they are winning, they relax. I told him I had spoken to a real estate agent. I said selling the house might be the only way to keep us afloat if his recovery dragged on. I spoke slowly, as if the words hurt me to say. I lowered my eyes at the right moment, let my voice catch slightly. The effect was instant. Jared's shoulders relaxed. His tone softened. He reached for my hand, held it longer than usual, and talked about how grateful he was, how frightened he felt about the future, how he did not want to be a burden. Alana watched closely from the chair by the window, relief evident on her face. Later that day, members of Jared's family called and spoke about sacrifice, survival, and doing what was necessary. They spoke about how money meant nothing compared to life. I nodded. I listened. I did not argue. Behind the scenes, I met with a lawyer who specialized in family and financial law. I gathered financial records and traced debt patterns, gambling transfers, and unofficial lenders Jared had tried to bury under silence. Piece by piece, everything he had hidden surfaced cleanly on paper. The more I uncovered, the less surprised I felt. It was like finally seeing the whole picture after staring too long at a single corner. Alana grew careless. She stayed out late and arrived at the hospital complaining about traffic that did not match the time she left home. She whispered too confidently in corners of the room, assuming my exhaustion made me inattentive. She stopped hiding her impatience when I delayed decisions about the house, about signing documents, about calling the agent again. When people believe the ending is guaranteed, they stop watching their steps. Jared began slipping too. Some days he forgot to moan at the right time. Some days he sat up too straight before noticing my presence and sinking back into the pillows with exaggerated effort. Some days I walked in and caught him with his phone in hand, his expression clear and untroubled, before he rearranged his features into the careful mask of a patient in pain. I noticed everything and documented what mattered. Still, I said nothing, because timing matters more than outrage. I was not waiting for revenge. I was waiting for the moment when the truth would collapse the story they had built, when revealing what I knew would do more than satisfy my anger. It would protect the things that mattered: my home, my future, my sense of self. I knew that moment was coming very soon. I could feel it in the way Jared's questions about the house became more frequent and more frantic. The night everything collapsed came quietly. Visiting hours were almost over. The hallway outside Jared's room was calm, filled with the soft rhythm of distant footsteps and rolling carts. His mother, Patricia Turner, sat beside the bed, whispering prayers under her breath, fingers twisting the edge of her cardigan. Alana stood near the window, checking her phone too often, the light from the screen reflecting on her face. Jared looked nervous, his eyes darting from me to the door. "Have you heard back from the agent?" Jared asked, his voice strained. "Did they say when the sale could go through?" "It is moving forward," I answered gently. "These things take time. You know that." "We do not have time," he snapped, then quickly softened his tone when his mother looked at him sharply. "I just mean the bills, the rehab. It is a lot." "I understand," I said. "We are doing everything we can." He asked the same questions twice, then 3 times, circling back to the house each time as if he could not help himself. Patricia reached over and stroked his hair, telling him God would provide, that family would not let him fall. I stood at the foot of the bed, hands clasped, my expression calm. Inside, I counted my breaths. 1, 2, 3. I felt the moment approaching, like a storm you can sense before you see it. Then the door opened. 3 men walked in without hesitation. They did not look like family. Their posture was stiff, their eyes sharp, their clothes neat but worn. The air in the room changed instantly. Patricia stood up, clutching her purse. Alana straightened by the window, her hand tightening around her phone. Jared's eyes widened. One of the men looked directly at Jared and spoke his full name. "Jared Turner," he said. "We have been looking for you." Jared's face drained of color. He began moaning loudly, grabbing the sheets as if his legs had suddenly become unbearable. "Who are you?" Patricia demanded. "Why are you coming in here like this?" "He is recovering." The man offered a cold, polite smile. "We are here about money," he said. The room went silent. They explained the amount Jared owed, the interest, the deadline that had already passed. They spoke without raising their voices, yet every word landed with weight. They said they were tired of waiting. They asked when they would be paid. Jared turned to me quickly, desperation rising in his voice. "Gabrielle is selling her parents' house," he said. "The money is coming. I have told you that. She is handling everything." All eyes shifted to me. I stepped forward, my heart steady, my voice calm. "There will be money," I said, "but not from my house." Patricia turned toward me in confusion. "Gabrielle, what are you talking about?" she asked. "You said—" "I said a lot of things so I could gather what I needed," I replied. "And now I have what I need." I took out my phone, a small remote device from my bag, and connected it to the screen on the wall where patient information was usually displayed. The men watched with interest. Patricia frowned. Jared's breathing became louder, dramatic, frantic. Alana pressed her back against the wall as if she wanted to disappear. Without raising my voice, without letting my hand shake, I pressed play. The footage filled the room. Jared sitting up, laughing, eating, drinking beer. Alana beside him, leaning close. Their voices echoed in the small space, explaining everything they thought would never be heard. The act, the plan, the house, the debts, the intention to divorce after the money cleared. Patricia screamed, a sound that seemed to tear itself out of her as she clutched her chest and sank into the chair. Alana collapsed against the wall, her hands shaking, her phone slipping from her grip and clattering to the floor. "I did not mean," she started, but her voice faded into a whisper. Jared tried to speak, but no sound came out at first. He looked at me, then at the men, then back at the screen as if hoping it would vanish. The men watched without interrupting, arms folded, faces unreadable. When the video ended, the leader of the group shook his head and let out a low, humorless laugh. "I have seen a lot," he said, "but I have never seen someone fake a tragedy this thoroughly." He stepped closer to Jared's bed. "You should be grateful your wife is more careful than you are." They left with a warning for Jared, a clear timeline, and no promise of understanding. When the door closed behind them, the room felt hollow. Jared reached for me, his hand trembling now for reasons that had nothing to do with physical pain. "Gabrielle, listen," he said. "It is not what it looks like. I was scared. I did not know what else to do. Alana pushed me into this. I can explain. We can fix this." I looked at him for a long moment and felt nothing at all. The performance was over. The lights were on. Everyone had finally seen the truth. Staff members came and went. A doctor checked Jared's vitals, clearly unsettled by the presence of the men and the revelation of the footage. Hospital administration stepped in, asking questions, speaking in low, serious tones about policy and liability. Through it all, I remained calm, answering only when necessary. Patricia cried openly, torn between anger and shame. Alana could not meet my eyes. She kept repeating that she was young, that she had been influenced, that she never meant for it to go that far. When the room finally emptied and the chaos settled into a thick, heavy silence, Jared began again. "Please do not leave," he said. His voice cracked, the words tumbling over one another. "Do not abandon me now that everything is exposed. We have history. We can rebuild. I will change. I promise." I did not raise my voice. I did not argue. I simply picked up my bag and adjusted the strap over my shoulder. "Trust dismantled piece by piece cannot be rebuilt with panic and words," I said quietly. "I will not sell the house. I will not take responsibility for your debts. I will be filing for divorce. Whatever happens with the people you owe is between you and them." Patricia sobbed, asking me to reconsider, to think about forgiveness, to remember the man Jared had been. Alana muttered apologies without substance. I listened and felt as if I were standing on the other side of a glass wall, their voices muffled and distant. I gathered my things slowly, the same way I had done every night for weeks. This time, my hands did not shake. I did not look back at the bed, the machines, or the man who had once occupied so much of my future. At the door, I paused. Jared stared at me with wide, frantic eyes. "This is not punishment," I said. "This is consequence. Consequences do not require cruelty to be effective." Then I walked out of the hospital room. The night air outside was cold and sharp, cutting through the fabric of my coat as I stepped into the parking lot. Chicago's city lights reflected off the wet pavement, turning puddles into scattered fragments of color. Cars passed on the nearby street without noticing me, their headlights sweeping over my face for a moment, and then moving on. For the first time since the accident, I felt something close to relief. I was no longer waiting in a chair beside someone else's deception. I was walking forward on my own terms. I unlocked my car, slid into the driver's seat, and rested my hands on the steering wheel. The silence inside the vehicle felt complete. I did not cry. I did not celebrate. I simply breathed and allowed the reality to settle. The next steps would be difficult, but for the first time in weeks, they would be mine. After I left the hospital, everything moved faster than I expected. The divorce papers were filed within days. With the evidence I had gathered, there was no room for negotiation. Jared's debts were documented as his own, separate and undisguised. The house remained mine, clean and untouched, exactly as my parents had intended when they signed their names on the documents years earlier. Jared's world, on the other hand, began to fold in on itself. Investigations followed. Hospital administrators questioned his behavior and reviewed additional footage. His insurance company requested records. The people he owed money to did not simply vanish. His health deteriorated quickly once the performance ended. Without an audience to manipulate, there was nothing left to sustain the lie. Alana disappeared from my life entirely. No calls, no messages, no attempts to explain beyond the desperate words in that hospital room. I did not look for her. For a while, I lived very quietly. I returned to work, burying myself in spreadsheets, audits, and reports that did not ask anything from my emotions. Numbers did not lie, not in the same way people did. In the evenings, I went home to the brownstone, cooked simple meals, and sat in rooms that finally felt honest. There was loneliness, yes, but there was also a kind of peace I had forgotten was possible. In the first weeks alone, I kept expecting my phone to ring with Jared's voice begging for one more chance, or for a family member to knock on my door to argue on his behalf. There were a few calls, a few half-hearted attempts at persuasion, but they faded quickly when it became clear I would not shift. The space around me grew quieter. I learned what my evenings felt like without constant anxiety humming in the background. It was during this period that I met Daniel Brooks. He was introduced through work during a joint meeting between my firm and an outside consulting group. He was calm and observant, a man who listened more than he spoke. He did not dominate the conversation. He waited, considered, and then offered precise comments that showed he had been paying attention. When the meeting ended, he walked beside me toward the elevator. "I appreciated the way you explained that fraud pattern," Daniel said. "You made something complicated sound almost simple." "Years of practice," I replied. "It is easier when you spend all day staring at the same kinds of mistakes." He smiled slightly. "Or the same kinds of choices," he said. "Mistakes usually have a way out. Choices tend to stick." We started with small, ordinary exchanges. Short conversations after meetings. A shared coffee in the lobby when schedules lined up. Discussions about work, cities, and minor frustrations. The crowded trains, the unpredictable weather by the lake, the way deadlines always arrived in clusters. He did not ask personal questions right away. When he sensed I was holding certain things back, he respected that boundary without comment. One evening, after a long day spent on a demanding case, Daniel suggested we walk a few blocks instead of heading straight to the parking garage. The air was cool, the sky streaked with faint orange. We walked past storefronts closing for the night, the sound of traffic fading as we turned down a quieter street. "You always look like you are carrying 3 layers of thought," he said, glancing at me. "Does your mind ever rest?" "Not easily," I answered. "But I am working on it." We did not trade traumatic stories or rush into confessions. Our conversations unfolded slowly, like pages turning in a book that did not need to be finished in one sitting. When I hesitated, he noticed. When I needed space, he gave it willingly and did not treat distance as an insult. There was no pressure to explain my past, no urgency to define anything quickly. That difference mattered more than I expected. It took time before I told him about Jared. When I did, we were sitting across from each other at a small table in a quiet restaurant, the low hum of conversation around us forming a soft background. I spoke plainly, without dramatizing or cutting details away. I described the hospital, the note from Patrice, the footage, the confrontation, and the divorce. Daniel listened without interrupting. When I finished, he did not say that he was sorry in the way most people did, as if the word could patch anything. He folded his hands and sat quietly for a moment. "You did what you had to do," he said finally. "You protected what was yours and refused to carry what was not. That is not cruelty. That is clarity." I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding. "There are people who would disagree," I said that he shook his head. "There are always people who prefer a comfortable lie over an uncomfortable truth," he replied. "That does not mean the lie deserves to win." On another evening, as we sat on a bench near the river watching the water move steadily under the bridges, Daniel said something that stayed with me. "Trust is not something you demand," he said. "It is something you earn slowly through consistency. Anyone can promise to be different. The real test is whether they act the same way when no one is watching." Those words settled somewhere deep in my chest, touching a place that still felt raw. I realized that for years I had mistaken intensity for commitment and endurance for love. I had believed that suffering quietly was proof of loyalty, that swallowing discomfort was part of being a good partner. With Daniel, there was no suffering to justify, no performance to maintain. I did not feel the need to shrink myself to avoid conflict or bend my instincts to protect someone else's ego. I was cautious, but not out of fear. I was cautious because I finally understood my own worth. We did not rush into labels or promises. What we built was slower and far steadier than anything I had known before. In that slowness, I felt something I had not felt in a long time: safety. Not the fragile safety built on silence and sacrifice, but the kind that allows you to breathe without watching every word or step. The kind that does not require you to doubt your own eyes to keep the peace. Looking back now, I understand something I could not see when I was sitting in that hospital chair, counting Jared's breaths and ignoring my own unease. This was never truly a story about revenge, despite how neatly it might appear that way from the outside. It was a story about clarity. For a long time, I believed love meant endurance. I believed loyalty meant silence. I believed that if I gave a little more, waited a little longer, everything would eventually make sense. The truth was much simpler. When respect disappears, patience does not save a relationship. It only delays the damage. Jared did not lose me because of one mistake. He lost me because he chose deception over honesty and convenience over character, again and again, until there was nothing left for me to stand on. And when the floor finally fell away, I had a choice: fall with him or step back. I did not walk away to hurt him. I walked away to avoid abandoning myself. I chose my dignity over his drama, my future over his chaos. That decision did not feel triumphant or grand. It felt quiet, like closing a door that should have been shut long before. I returned to my life, to my work, to the house my parents left me, and learned how to live in spaces that no longer echoed with someone else's lies. In the end, what remained was not the memory of Jared's performance or Alana's complicity, not even the shock of that hospital confrontation. What remained was the image of myself standing in that room with the truth on the screen behind me and calm in my voice, choosing not to explain, not to plead, not to bargain. I chose to act, to protect what mattered most, and to walk forward without turning around. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.